All right, so Tornado Alley, right. It's one of those things you hear about, like, everyone kind of knows what it is.
Yeah.
But then when I actually dug into it, I was like, wait, could I draw this on a map? Like, I don't actually know the boundaries.
It's funny how these common terms, we don't actually, like, what do they really mean?
Right.
And this Wikipedia article, right off the bat, points out that even the National Weather Service is like, we don't have official borders for this thing.
So how do we even define it then? Where do we even start?
Well, it's kind of like, how do you measure a tornado, right?
Right.
Some people, they look at the pure number of tornadoes in an area.
Okay.
And others, they focus on how often you get those really intense ones, the EF4, EF5s.
Oh, so the map's going to look different depending on what you're using to define it.
Totally. Like if you go by sheer numbers, Texas historically has been kind of the king.
Uh-huh.
But if you look at it like tornadoes per square mile,
Mm-hmm.
to make it fair,
Right, right.
Kansas and Oklahoma, they're usually battling it out for the top spot. Although, get this, Florida's been giving them a run for their money lately on that per area basis.
Hold on, Florida. I thought that was all, like, sunshine and oranges.
Right. You think hurricanes, right?
Yeah.
But here's the catch. A lot of Florida's tornadoes are actually waterspouts,
Oh, okay.
which tend to be weaker than those, like, monster twisters we imagine ripping through, like, the Great Plains.
That makes sense, yeah. So we've got these different ways of measuring, but regardless, it seems like there are a few states that are always in the mix, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota.
Think of those as, like, the heartland.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
you've got your, kind of tends to you ask states.
Right.
Illinois, Indiana, even dips up into Canada a bit.
Well, yeah, because it's not like the weather just stops at the border.
Exactly. And that kind of gets us to the why of Tornado Alley in the first place. It's all about geography, right? You got these perfect storm conditions.
Literally.
Literally. You've got the warm, humid air, think Gulf of Mexico, flowing up. And then you've got the cold, dry air sweeping down from Canada and the Rockies.
Oh, wow.
It's like a meteorological showdown.
So we're talking, like, clashes.
Big time. And that clash that's where you get those supercell thunderstorms.
Okay, wait. Now, for those of us who don't speak fluent, weather patterns, what makes a supercell so super?
Oh, it's all in the spin. Supercells, they have this rotating updraft. It's almost like a spinning top, right?
Yeah.
And that rotation, that's key to getting a tornado going.
Okay.
So they're like the heavyweights of the thunderstorm world, and Tornado Alley is their wrestling ring.
So I'm seeing the location, I'm seeing these like atmospheric battles happening, but this article mentions that there might not be just one tornado alley, there might be multiples.
It's true. Some researchers, they're like, the central U.S., there's just one piece of it. They point to other areas that have like similar ingredients for tornadoes. Like the upper Midwest. Think about that. The lower Ohio Valley, even the Tennessee and lower Mississippi Valley.
Wow, okay.
Sometimes called, get this, Dixie Alley.
Dixie Alley.
Dixie Alley, I know, right?
There's like nicknames for all these things.
I guess so. But it highlights that, the timing of tornado seasons might be a little different in these other alleys. Maybe some regions tend to have stronger tornadoes, but ultimately it's still those same large-scale weather patterns at play.
So less about like a fixed line on a map and more about understanding like how these things work together to make these things possible.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it leads us to something that researchers are really starting to think about. What if Tornado Alley isn't just a place, but more of a pattern that can move?
Wait, hold on. Are you saying Tornado Alley might be on the move? Get out of here.
I know. It's wild, right? Like, where would it even go?
Yeah.
Well, in 2018, a study came out, and it basically dropped a bombshell. It suggested that the heartland of Tornado Alley might be shifting eastward.
Okay, now I got to hear more. This is getting good.
Right. So this study, they looked at tornado data all the way back to 1979 up to 2017, so, a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
And they found some interesting changes. They saw fewer tornadoes happening in parts of north-central Texas. But get this, an increase in places like the Mid-South, especially near Memphis, Tennessee, and northern Mississippi.
So not necessarily like less tornadoes overall, just they're showing up in different places.
Exactly. And that has huge implications for how we prepare for disasters, how we even educate the public about the risks, everything.
Because if you think you're, outside a tornado alley, you might not be as prepared.
Exactly. It's like a wake-up call. We got to be constantly learning and adapting here.
Speaking of learning and adapting, I always just assumed tornado alley was it's always been a thing. But this article mentions the term is surprisingly recent.
It's true. The actual phrase Tornado Alley first popped up in 1952.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and it was thanks to two Air Force meteorologists, Major Ernest J. Fawbush and Captain Robert C. Miller.
Okay.
They were doing this research project focused on parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and they were the ones who, like, casually called their study area Tornado Alley.
So the name they came up with for this one project just stuck.
Stuck like glue. And even though their research, it was just a tiny part of what we think of as Tornado Alley now, right?
Right.
But the name itself, it captured people's imaginations, and it just expanded to cover this much bigger area.
Wow, that's wild how that happens. So we've got a catchy name. We've got a region that might be more of a moving target than we thought. But what about the people who actually live in Tornado Alley? Like, how did they deal with this constant threat?
You would think, right, with that level of risk, that building codes in Tornado Alley would be like the strictest, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Like way more intense than anywhere else.
You'd think so, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Like, you compare them to a place like South Florida, right? Hurricanes all the time.
Right. Yeah.
They often have much stricter building regulations.
That's so interesting. So if it's not necessarily building codes, then what is it that protects people in Tornado Alley?
Well, for one thing, awareness is huge. Like, growing up in Tornado Alley, that means growing up with tornado drills,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
storm cellars,
Right.
the sound of those sirens. It's just part of life there.
Part of life. And get this, the research mentions that Canada has a Tornado Alley too.
They do. Right. It doesn't get as much press, maybe. But Canada actually has the second highest number of tornadoes globally.
What? No way. I had no idea.
After the U.S.
Wow.
So, yeah, Canada's got its own tornado alley. It's mainly in the southern parts of a few provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and it even dips down to Ontario.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it basically picks up where ours leaves off and heads north.
Exactly.
Wow.
And, just like here, they've actually seen an increase in tornado activity in certain areas lately, especially a place called the Ottawa Valley. Some people are even calling it Tornado Valley now, which I kind of love.
Tornado Valley, yeah.
It's got a ring to it.
It does have a ring to it. But it is interesting. Again, it's a little further east than you might expect, which I guess just goes to show these things are always in flux, right?
Always changing, yeah.
Wow. We've covered a lot from is there even one Tornado Alley to where'd the name come from? This Wikipedia article has been packed. What else is out there?
We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover about how Tornado Alley is changing, what it means for the people who live there.
I'm ready. Stay tuned, listeners. We're going to uncover even more about this wild phenomenon in part 2 of our deep dive into Tornado Alley.
It's easy to get stuck in that old school view of Tornado Alley, but like we've been saying, it's way more complex than that. Tornadoes can pop up wherever the ingredients are right,
That's true. And speaking of ingredients, you mentioned Florida's seen a surge in tornadoes per area. I'm curious, does that connect to this whole eastward shift thing?
That's what's got people talking. Remember that 2018 study, the one that showed fewer tornadoes in north central Texas?
Yeah, yeah.
But more happening around the Mid-South.
Right, especially around Memphis.
Exactly. Now, we need more research, of course, but Florida's uptick could be part of this bigger trend. Like the whole active zone for tornadoes is just scooching east.
Okay, so we might be seeing this shift, but why? What could be making Tornado Alley redraw its own lines, so to speak?
$1,000,000 question. And there's no simple answer, but a lot of researchers, they're pointing at climate change.
Climate change, yeah, that makes sense. But how does that even work with tornadoes? It's not like hotter weather just poof, makes a twister, right?
More like dominoes. Climate change is messing with the whole weather system,
Right.
Air temperatures, how much moisture is in the air, even wind patterns. And guess what those are?
The recipe for tornadoes.
Bingo. It's like, you remember that clash of warm, moist air from the Gulf meets the cold, dry air from up north?
Yeah, yeah.
If those air masses are changing, even a little, that changes where they clash.
Oh, so it's like they're bumping into each other in different places now.
Exactly. Even tiny changes to those big air masses can have a huge impact on tornadoes. And climate change is driving those changes.
So less about the world just getting hotter, more about all these complex shifts going on.
100%. And those shifts, they're not always predictable, which is why it's so hard to say, Tornado Alley is going to move here next.
Oh, wow. So if the classic Tornado Alley idea is kind of out the window, what do people in those areas even do? How do you get ready for that?
That's the million-dollar question, part two. We can't just rely on old data anymore, right?
Right.
Building codes, disaster plans, even just letting people know what's up, all that's got to change too.
Like, we need a whole new rule book.
Kinda, yeah. And it's not just about keeping up with the research, it's about being proactive. Even if you live somewhere that only sees tornadoes every now and then, you got to be ready.
Absolutely. Know what to look for, have a plan, and don't underestimate those storms, ever.
And I'd add, stay informed. The National Weather Service, they're your best friend.
So true. They've got all that info on, like, understanding their warnings and stuff.
Right, like knowing if it's a watch or a warning, that's huge.
Huge difference. A watch means get ready. A warning means get to safety now.
Exactly.
And if you're in a tornado-prone area, have a plan. Like, where are you going if you see one?
Yes.
Make sure everyone in your house knows. Practice it.
Like a fire drill, but for twisters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what about Canada's Tornado Alley? They're dealing with this too, right? And Tornado Valley up there, that's kind of a new hotspot, maybe?
Tornadoes don't care about borders.
That's true.
Whether it's Oklahoma or Ontario, same rules.
I'll be wine.
Already.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about Tornado Alley, maybe moving, climate change, mixing things up. What about people? Are there folks who are, like, ahead of the curve on this? Anyone we can learn from?
There are. One that comes to mind is Moore, Oklahoma.
More. That's where that awful EF5 hit back in 2013, right?
Yeah, that was devastating. Just awful destruction. But what's amazing is how they bounced back. Rebuilt smarter, you know?
What do you mean smarter?
Well, after that tornado, Moore put in way stricter building codes.
Oh, okay.
This was in 2014. Stronger roofs, better connections between the building and its foundation, all designed to handle stronger winds. Big step forward.
So they took this awful thing and made it a reason to change.
Exactly. Now, look, stronger buildings don't mean you're totally safe from a tornado like that, but they can make a huge difference. Less damage, hopefully saving lives.
That's inspiring. Are other places following their lead?
It's the goal, for sure, but it's tough. Updating those codes costs money, and not everyone's on board.
Yeah, I get that. But long term, not doing that, it's got to be worse, right?
100%. And it's bigger than just buildings, too. It's the whole community.
Mm-hmm.
How prepared are they? Early warnings, safe places to go.
It's a whole big system.
Exactly. So, yeah, there are good things happening, but lots to do still.
Okay, so we've got steps in the right direction at least.
Yeah. But the biggest thing, to me, is that we're having this conversation. We're admitting that Tornado Alley isn't set in stone. It's dynamic, it's changing, and we've got to keep up.
I'm with you on that. It's kind of funny, right? We call it Tornado Alley, like it's this one specific spot.
Yeah.
But really, it's way more, like, shifty than that, based on what we've learned.
It's like language can trick us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Our understanding changes, but the words don't always keep up.
Totally. We can't be stuck with these old maps in our heads about where tornadoes belong.
Exactly. And that's why all this research matters so much. The more we get it, how tornadoes do their thing, what makes them more frequent, where they go.
The better we can deal with them.
100%. Like we said before, being proactive. So what does that even look like for folks, besides a storm shelter, obviously?
Yeah, right.
Number one, weather awareness. Got to know those warning signs. Weather forecasts, those warnings, take them seriously.
The National Weather Service website, bookmark that thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
They've got like a whole guide on how their warning system even works.
Because knowing the difference between, like, a watch and a warning, that's huge.
Life or death sometimes. Watch means, okay, conditions are right for a tornado. Be ready. Warning means one's been spotted. Take cover now.
And have a plan. If you're in a tornado-prone area, know exactly where you're going.
Yes.
Everyone in the house needs to know it. Drill it.
Like it's a fire drill, but for the sky.
Exactly. And what about our Canadian listeners? They've got their own Tornado Alley to think about. Plus that Tornado Valley, that's kind of a new thing to watch.
Tornadoes don't see borders, that's for sure.
So true.
Oklahoma, Ontario, wherever. Be ready.
This has been eye-opening for sure. I feel like we went beyond just Tornado Alley. It's about staying informed, period, and being willing to update what we think we know.
That's the best part about these deep dives, right? Learning something new opens up all these other doors.
Right.
In this case, how powerful nature is.
For sure. So for everyone listening, what's the one thing we want them to walk away with from this Tornado Alley adventure?
For me, it's this. We use that term, Tornado Alley, all casual, but the reality is way more wild, way more interesting too. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. Because when it comes to tornadoes, knowing the facts, that can literally make all the difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, deep divers, keep on learning.